Okay, good afternoon. Happy Chanukah. And since it's Chanukah, we're going to continue to talk about Chanukah, living with light with Chanukah. So I want to discuss three topics today of things we do on Chanukah. One just relates to lighting the menorah again, which we spoke about a bit last week. The other relates to the custom to eat donuts, and the third relates to the custom of the dreidel. So So we mentioned last week, and when it comes to the mitzvah, the rabbinic commandment of lighting the menorah, so the way that it was established was ner ish ubeso, each person and their household, which means that the basic mitzvah is that every household just needs one light every day, and then if you want to do Mahadring, the higher level, you do one light per person each day, and the highest is to go up 1 to 8, according to Basel, which is the position that we accept. But the idea that in the first place it's it's a mitzvah on the household is something that we should reflect on because the whole idea of lighting the menorah, as discussed in the early sources, is Pirsum Nisa, is publicizing the miracle. So perhaps it would be better to light the menorah in public places. And some people do that, but that's not the actual mitzvah. The mitzvah, there's no requirement to do that. So there's different opinions about whether you can make a bracha when you do it that way. Those who do obviously take the position that you could, but but the main mitzvah was that you should light the menorah in your house, and and it's not a public joint effort. Contrast that with reading the Megillah. Reading the Megillah, yes, it's a mitzvah on each individual to hear the Megillah, but it's done gathered in the shul. That's how it's classically done. That's how it's encouraged to be done. While menorah, again, there's a custom that it's lit in the shul, but that's just a custom. That's not the basic mitzvah, and that's not the requirement. The requirement is that every household should light Hanukkah lights. So what lies behind that? If the goal here is Pirsum Nisa, publicizing the miracle, let's just do it in a more public way, in a public forum. Perhaps that would be a better way to accomplish that. So Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein, in his book about Hanukkah, he quotes from a Sefer Ori V'ishi, written by Rabbi Uri Jungreis, who's a contemporary, I believe, and and Rabbi Jungreis suggests that the message of having each household light their own Hanukkah lights is to teach us and to emphasize the role of every household, and not just every household, but every individual. That every household can, so to speak, light up the world. Every household can make a difference. Every person, every individual can make a difference and make an impact. The Hanukkah story, the Hanukkah miracle, was set into motion by a family, Matisyahu and his 5 sons. And it wasn't this huge revolution that swept the nation. It was a small group, but really based on one family. And and at the top of that family was, I think, Matisyahu. Again, I haven't read up so much but we've heard the stories, and Matisyahu was the one. Maybe Yehuda had a role. Each one had their role, but it was individuals. It was a group of individuals that inspired each other, and that's what that's what initiated the whole story of Hanukkah. And so, to bring out this idea, the mitzvah is on the individual, the household, and each person should have menorah burning in their household, reminding us that we each have the ability and the responsibility even to try to bring more light, to try to make an impact the way that the Maccabees, the Hashmonai, Matisyahu and his family did. That's number one. To add a second level to that, so just to make the point even further, if a person, besides for that, it's on each individual in each house, but the halacha would only require a person to light if they have a house. if a person, God forbid, was homeless, then they would not have an obligation to light the menorah. The menorah, the candles, I call it a menorah. It's not a menorah, but that's what we call it. To light Chanukah lights, the obligation to light Chanukah lights is ner ishu beso. It's on a house, and it's only if one has a house. All the questions get raised if a person's traveling and what they're supposed to do. But it's on the, what's considered a person's house needs to be defined, but it's definitely not out in the street. So the mitzvah is specifically on the house, and if a person didn't have a house, then they would likely be exempt from lighting the menorah. So why do we need a house to light to light the Chanukah lights? Why is it critical? So the answer that Rabbi Bernstein brings is that the mitzvah of our Chanukah lights, of course, commemorates the mitzvah that occurred, the miracle that occurred with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. And so, in a certain sense, we are emulating that. We're copying that. Again, our menorah does not look like the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. You're actually not allowed to make a menorah that resembles the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. The menorah of the Beis Hamikdash of the temple had 7 branches. Ours doesn't need to have any branches; just has to have lights. Many people have branches, but the concept of having Chanukah lights is modeled after the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. The halacha is that you're not allowed to benefit from the lights because they are kodeshim. They're kodesh. We say after we light the menorah, we recite Haneros Halalu, and we say kodeshim. They are holy. Ve'en lanu rishus lishtamish b'hem. We don't have permission to use them. Elo lirosam bilvad. We're only allowed to look at them. They're not to be. We can't benefit from them. And the Ran, one of the medieval commentaries, says that the reason why we can't benefit from them is because just like the light of the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash couldn't be used for one's personal use, so too the lights of our Chanukah lights can't be used for our personal use. And so what emerges is that the Chanukah lights that we light are modeled after the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. And that being the case, that means that our house is the sanctuary of the Beis Hamikdash. If our menorah is the menorah, then our house is the sanctuary, is the Beis Hamikdash itself. And so the message is more than just the message of the menorah; it's the message of the house, that we have the ability to turn our house into somewhat of a Beis Hamikdash, a mikdash ma'at, a mini mikdash, a mini temple, a place that can reflect the holiness of the Beis Hamikdash. And as opposed to perhaps in some other religions where religion is practiced only in the temples, in the church, whatever it might be, but for us, no, we have a mezuzah on our door. We engage in Jewish practice everywhere. It's a lifestyle. It's a whole life. It's not just something that's done in a temple. And on Chanukah, we're reminded of this when we turn our very homes into a Beis Hamikdash by lighting our menorah. And that's why, says Rabbi Bernstein, it's specifically one who has a house that has the mitzvah to light Chanukah lights, because we, in addition to lighting the lights, we are turning our house into the Beis Hamikdash, and that can only be done within one's home. Okay, I guess just a question that just popped into my head. Maybe a question on this approach is that in its origin, the mitzvah was to light outside. In Israel, as many do, but specifically at the entrance to the courtyard. So not so much in the house. The menorah was lit in the sanctuary of the Beis Hamikdash. So it doesn't exactly reflect that. If one is doing it in the way that the Gemara lays it out. Now, for nowadays, certainly outside of Israel, we don't do it that way anymore. but originally it was said to do it at the entrance to your courtyard outside. But maybe the answer could be, and this gets into a whole discussion, is actually in the Al Anisim, we say um, when we tell over the story of Chanukah in the Al Anisim is the insertion in the Amida and in Birkas Hamazon and benching for Chanukah. So we say V'idliku neiros bechatzos kachecha. They lit lights in the courtyard of your abode, of your holy abode. Now, what does that mean? The menorah wasn't in the courtyard. The menorah was in the sanctuary. It wasn't out in the courtyard. So why do we say that they lit it in the courtyard? So there's different explanations, but one of them is the Chassam Sofer says, no, they actually lit the menorah in the courtyard because the sanctuary was too defiled to light in the sanctuary. So they brought the menorah out to the courtyard. So that could be the origin, perhaps, of lighting in the courtyards and can still fit into this general theme of turning our home into the Beis Hamikdash. At that time, they were in the courtyard, so we originally lived in the courtyard. Now we bring it into our homes. But the idea, again, that Rabbi Bernstein is suggesting here is that we he's quoting a work called Binyan Shlomo, is that we light specifically, one needs a house to light the Hanukkah lights because they want to turn their home into a little mini Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about lighting menorah for this afternoon. Now I want to share one idea about the custom to eat donuts. So obviously not the oldest custom, although I think actually there's pretty early sources that they would eat sufganin in on Hanukkah, what we call now sufganiyot, some kind of fried food. And by early, I think even in the medieval commentaries, the idea pops up. It's not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, as far as I remember, the custom to eat oily foods, but I think it appears in earlier sources. In any event, the Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach suggests a very novel idea for why the custom emerged to eat donuts specifically, sufganiyot, fried dough. And Rav Shlomo Zalman notes that there's something unique about the after blessing of when eating something that's mizonos, that's a mizonos food like a donut versus the full birkas hamazon. So the after blessing for one who eats mizonos food is we would call al hamichya. The proper name would be the bracha achas me'ein shalosh, which means the one bracha that's like three. So benching birkas hamazon is made up of three blessings which are biblically required, and then an additional fourth blessing which is rabbinically required. But benching has the first bracha is Hazan Esalam Kula B'Tuvo, that God provides, sustains. The second bracha is Noda Lecha, thanking God. Al Haaretz Ve'al Hamazon ends, and the third one is about Uvnei Yerushalayim, rebuilding Jerusalem. All those three blessings get combined into one for the after blessing for mizonos foods, for cakes and cookies and the like. And we call it bracha achas me'ein shalosh. Now, there's something, though, that somehow made its way into Al HaMichya. I don't know why, and I don't think Reb Shlomo Zalman explains, at least over here, why. But there's a mention in Al HaMichya that does not get mentioned in the regular Birkas Hamazon. And that is that we say that God should have mercy. We say God should have mercy in regular benching also. But we in Al HaMichya we say that God should have mercy on the Jewish people and on Jerusalem, and we mention V'al Mizbechecha, and on your altar, on your Mizbeach. And that is not mentioned in benching. It's only mentioned in Al HaMichya. And Reb Shlomo Zalman suggests that the reason why the custom emerged to eat donuts is, besides for the oil, the common understanding is it's oil and the miracle happened with oil, He says no, but specifically we want to make an ala mechia because we want to be able to mention the mizbeach. Now, the way that Reb Shlomo Zalman says why we want to mention the mizbeach is is as follows. He says, just want to say the exact language. Um, he says that when they, and this is based on the Gemara tells us that when they reclaimed the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, when the Chashmonaim came back to the temple, the Mizbeach also was defiled, and they were not able to purify it. So whatever the exact mechanics of that were, but they weren't able to purify it, so they had to destroy it and had to build a new one. So, and that the Gemara discusses. So Reb Shlomo Zalman says that that because we were not able to purify it, it was very painful for us at the time. It was very difficult. And that's why we want to mention it, which sounds like he's saying that that we want to remember kind of the difficulty of the time. We mention God should have mercy to rebuild Jerusalem and the Mizbeach, the altar, because they also were without an altar at that time and had to build a new one. That seems to be how he says it, but there's perhaps another way to say it, and that some suggest, which is taking his idea that we say Ala Mechia because we want to mention the Mizbeach, but we're celebrating. It's more of a celebratory idea that they at the end of the day they did build a new Mizbeach and rededicate it. So we want to celebrate that. And so we by expressing our desire for God to give us a new Mizbeach, that God should have mercy on Jerusalem and on the temple and on the Mizbeach, we're expressing our desire for another one, but that's also kind of noting the celebration of the time of the day of Chanukah, that there was a Chanukah HaMizbeach, a rededication of the Mizbeach. In fact, there are commentaries who say, the Maharsha, that the reason why the holiday is called Chanukah is because of the dedication of the Mizbeach, the Chanukah HaMizbeach. The word Chanukah means to dedicate, to inaugurate, and they rededicated the Mizbeach, and that's why we call it Chanukah, specifically because of the Mizbeach. So by eating something that is mizonos, that requires the after blessing of Ala Mechia, we get to mention the Mizbeach, and as we ask for God to rebuild the temple and the Mizbeach, we're also expressing joy over that. At least at that time, they were able, in the story of Chanukah, they were able to rededicate the Mizbeach. Okay, so that's again a novel idea from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. The classic understanding of why we would have donuts and latkes is because they have oil, and the miracle happened with the oil. But and this explanation obviously is not going to work for latkes because latkes, the after blessing is not ala mechia. But for donuts, this is what he suggests. Okay. Now I want to talk about dreidels. So dreidels have somehow become the like the emblem of Chanukah. Everywhere you look, you see pictures of dreidels. Where did dreidels come from? They do not appear in any early sources, and they only start to be discussed probably within the last 200 years. So where does the whole idea of the dreidel come from? So there's a famous story. The famous story goes, this part is true, for sure, that the Greeks forbade us from fulfilling certain mitzvos, studying Torah, and bris milah, circumcision, Shabbos, and other things. So those were all outlawed. And the way the traditional story goes is something along the lines of, well, since they couldn't learn Torah, they would go and the Rebbe would take the children to either a building or caves or somewhere, and they would learn Torah. And as soon as Greek soldiers would come to inspect, they would quickly hide their Svarim if they had. It could be they didn't have Svarim actually at that time because they were learning Torah Shabbal Peh. Just there was only the Torah was not yet written down, at least the oral Torah. Um, or or I guess if they had Sifrei Torah that was written down, the written Torah, they would quickly hide it and pull out dreidels and say, "Oh, we were just playing dreidel, gambling, or something like that." That's I think what we would maybe call the traditional classic story, the one that has made it into an Uncle Moishy song and many other children's stories and the like. Now, where does this come from? This story that I think everybody is probably familiar with. So it seems that the first appearance of this explanation, this legend, was in a work that was published in St. Louis, Missouri in 1918 by a Rabbi Eliezer Hershowitz, who wrote a sefer called Otsar Kol Minhagei Yeshurun, the collection of the customs of Yeshurun. I think Yeshurun is Jews in general, maybe specifically um, of European or German. I'm not sure, but it's a collection of minhagim, of customs, and explanations for them. Now, Rabbi Hershowitz was originally from Kovno, Lithuania, and he he moved to the United States in 1908. He first lived in Pittsburgh and then later in St. Louis. And he wrote a number of different, he had a number of different editions of this work, Oats or Minhagei Yeshurun, the collection of customs. The first one was published while he still lived in Lithuania. Um, and but after he moved to America, he published an edition in 1918, and it had approximately 500 customs, minhagim, written in it. And one of them that he mentions is this custom of playing dreidel on Chanukah, and there he brings down this story. He says that we know the reason is, he says, because the Greeks had decreed that we couldn't study Torah. Like we mentioned in the Al Anisim prayer, we say that l'hashkicham Torasecha, they tried to make us forget the Torah. And everybody was learning orally in that time, oral Torah. There wasn't yet written down the oral Torah. And they would learn together to remind each other that they don't forget it. And the decree was you weren't allowed to gather to learn Torah. That would prevent the Torah from being studied because if you couldn't really learn it on your own. So you had to gather. So there was a decree against gathering. And so they found, in his words, an Eitzah Nifla, a wondrous solution to the problem. They made a game, Dreidel, that if they were found, they would say, "Oh, we were just playing our game," and that way they would continue to learn. And so this has remained as a commemoration of that miracle and of that time, that this is what preserved Torah till this day. That is what Rabbi Hershowitz brings down in the Otsar Minhagei Yeshurun. What is his source? His source is, it's in the name of the author of the work Avodas Aved and Tiferes Tzvi, and it's brought by Rav Zivo. Now, who is Rav Zivo? So on a comment on this article that I found, so there's an article about discussing this on the Svarim blog, and somebody in the comments said that after searching through the book, it seems that he's quoting his contemporary Rabbi Sivitz, who was a rabbi in Pittsburgh, and Rabbi Sivitz was bringing it from Rabbi Zriel Zelig Karlenstein, a rabbi from Lumza, Poland. And that's as far back as the traditional story, again, what we would call the traditional story, because I think everybody refers to that story, goes. So I'm going to leave it up to you how you feel about that tradition. I'll be quite honest, it never made any sense to me because, like, I mean, just try to imagine that happening. It just doesn't seem like it would really work to uh, and it could have been anything. Like I don't know why Dreidel, like the I don't know, the story just never sat well with me. And so to know that it only appeared for the first time in about 100 years ago, um, kind of sits with how I've thought about it. Okay, so then where does it come from? So the likelihood is that it does not, and again, others might, I don't want to, dismiss any other angles on this, but a very likely possibility is that it comes from a non-Jewish game, which was played in European countries called Titotum. And Tito might date back even to it's possible back to Greek times, but this was a game which had some kind of top, and it had letters on the sides and in Latin, and one of them said either had a letter or the words nothing, everything, half, and put in, and this was adopted by Jews. Could be that also was played around this time of year by non-Jews. And as adopted by Jews, they started playing it too. And they put the letters that we have on our dreidel, Nun, Gimel, He, Shin. Nun in Yiddish or German is nicht, where you get nothing. Gimel is ganz, everything. And He is halb, which is half. And Shin is either shtel or shlicht or something. It means to give, you have to put in. And that's probably where these letters come from. And it was a game, a gambling game, some kind of betting game that people played around this time of year. And it could be that it was brought to other cities and they didn't know what the letter, they didn't speak Yiddish perhaps, and they didn't know what the letter stood for, and so they applied what's I think more famous, which is that Nun Gimel He Shin is Nes Gadol Hayasham, that there was a great miracle, Nes, a miracle, Gadol, a big miracle, Haya was Sham there. And that's, I think, what's most familiar to us that those letters stand for. And so it's likely that that's where it originated. But it was adopted as a Jewish custom, and perhaps there's significance to that. It could be it just was something that people played, but the fact that it caught on and was accepted, and especially in the Hasidic communities, they really got into the messaging behind the dreidel. And again, wherever it originated, they were able to, you could call it hashgacha, that it was godly sent, that this should become a part of our tradition, even whatever the origin of it is, whether it's from that origin story that from the times of the Greeks or much later, it was borrowed from a game played by European Gentiles. But either way, it found its way into our tradition, and therefore we can try to ascribe meaning of why it caught on and why it became part of the Chanukah tradition. And so, especially in the Hasidic Svarim, they discuss it at length. I don't know what they thought the origin of it was. They don't talk about that. The whole origin story doesn't appear till later. There's maybe a vague reference. It's not really, yeah. So we don't know what they thought the origin was, but in any event, they saw it as a Hanukkah custom and tried to ascribe meaning to it. So that's where I want to spend the last few minutes on, is what is the meaning, what meaning can we apply to the concept of the dreidel? So, one approach, one idea that's offered by Reb Pinchas of Kuritz, is that the letters on the dreidel represent the mitzvos of Chanukah. You have um, Nun and Gimel. Sorry, Nun and Shin. Nun is Neros, lights, candles, and Shin is Shmona, 8. Neros, Shmona, that's the Nun and the Shin. And then you have Hey and Gimel. Hey is Hallel, and Gimel is Gomor because we have a complete Hallel. On some days we leave out certain paragraphs of Hallel, but on Chanukah we say the entire Hallel. So those are the two main mitzvahs of Chanukah. The main mitzvahs of Chanukah are lighting the menorah and saying Hallel. So you have Neiros Shmona and Hallel Gomor. That's the approach of Rav Pinchas Mikuritz. In an article in a journal called Or Yisrael, where he quotes this idea, he then quotes from someone else who says that there's an idea of Minhag Yisrael Torah, that customs in Israel are like Torah. And so he then goes a step further and he says, we say, Shivim Panim La Torah, there are 70 angles on Torah. Well, if there's 70 angles on Torah, and a Minhag Yisrael Torah, a custom is considered Torah, so there are 70 angles on a Minhag, 70 perspectives that you can take on a Minhag. So we can suggest many different perspectives on a Minhag, on a custom within the Jewish people. So that's one perspective, that Neiros, Nun Shin Hey Gimel, Neiros Shmona, 8 candles, and Hallel Gomor, and a complete Hallel. Another idea that's suggested is that that the reason why people play this, again, that doesn't explain why they play, that just explains the letters, but the reason why people play this is because we light the menorah inside, and you need people around to light the menorah, to be able to see it, and so to keep the children up, they would light the menorah. I don't know what time they were lighting the menorah in these European countries where this is being suggested, Poland, Russia, but so by us, I don't think it's hard to keep the kids up till 5:30. But this was a way to keep the kids up so they could see the Hanukkah lights was playing this game, and that's the significance of it. Okay, now there's a very fascinating idea that's quoted in the Sefer Taimei HaMenhagim. Taimei HaMenhagim is another work on customs and giving reasons behind them. And I think I saw this quoted in the name of the Bnei Yissaschar also. And that is a comparison between a dreidel and a grager. See, on Chanukah we spin a dreidel, and on Purim we spin a grager. We hold the handle of the grager and we spin it. And he suggests that there's something different besides for that a grager is a noisemaker, but a grager is held from the bottom, while a dreidel is held from the top. Unless you're fancy and you know how to spin it upside down, but normally you spin a dreidel, you hold on from the top, and a grager you hold on from the bottom. Now, what's the significance of that? So he suggests that the significance is that the miracle of Purim came about through what we would call isarusa dilatata. Isarusa dilatata means an awakening from down here. In other words, the Purim miracle came about because we saw the decree against us, and we rallied and davened and fasted, and that's what awakened God's mercy to bring about the miracle of Purim. It was an awakening that started from down here to call on God's mercy. Chanukah, on the other hand, he suggests, was in a isarusa de la Ela. It was an awakening from on high. It came from on high. It wasn't that we did something and that brought about the miracle. It was God put into the hearts of the Chashmonaim the strength and the courage to go out and fight and to fight the world. We don't find there was this like mass gathering of tefillah, of davening and fasting when it came to Chanukah. It was an awakening from on high that God inspired this group to go out and fight. and gave them the strength. And therefore, to emphasize that on that distinction, on Purim, we hold the Grager from the bottom. We spin from the bottom, meaning it came from down here, the miracle of Purim. While on Chanukah, we spin from on high because we hold it on top because the Chanukah miracle was initiated from on high, an isarusa de le'ela, an awakening from on high. With this, someone wanted to suggest, it's quoted in the footnotes of the Time Yam and Hagim, an explanation for why there's a distinction between the language used in Al Hanisim versus the bracha that we say after the Megillah. So in Al Hanisim we say that Hashem stood up for us in our difficult time, and we say Ravta es rivam, he fought their fight, he argued their argument, Danta es dinam, he judged their judgment, Nakamta es nikmasam, and you took revenge, you avenged their vengeance. And it's all there, meaning we're speaking to God and we're thanking him and we're saying, you, Raptus Ram, you argued their argument, you judged their judgment, and you avenged their vengeance. That's in Al Anisim. In the blessing that's said after we read the Megillah, we say, the one who argues our argument, the one who judges our judgment, and the one who avenges our vengeance. So in Chanukah and Al Anisim, we say their fight, and in the blessing after the Megillah, we say our fight. Why? What's the difference? So he suggests that the difference is, this is from a work called Ezer Eliyahu, and he suggests that the difference is that because by Purim it was our fight, we were involved. We were the ones who did the awakening. We davened. It was our fight. But by Chanukah, where again, in the end, we fought, but it was, according to this approach, it was an awakening from on high. So we say their fight, like you fought their fight, meaning you did it for them. You did it for them, not for us. We weren't as involved. It was for them. That's what it's suggested in the Ezer Eliyahu. Now, I was listening to a class from Rabbi Reisman, and he posed this question: why is there a difference? He did not mention this Ezer Eliyahu, but he said it's not a question in the first place. The answer is very simple. In Al Anisim, we are thanking Hashem for what he did at that time. So we're saying that's what Al Anisim is. It's in the blessing of thanks in Shemona Esrei and in benching, and we're just thanking Hashem for what he did at that time. So we say, you stood up for them in their time of difficulty. It's past tense. You fought their fight, and it's not us, it was them. You fought their fight, and you avenged their vengeance. So it's in past tense because we're talking about them. We're thanking him for what he did for them then. But the blessing after the Megillah is a blessing of praise. It's not thanking God for what happened in the past. It's praising God for what he does in the present. Haraves Rivenu, the one who fights our fights presently, and Danes Dinenu, and judges our judgments, and Nokim es Nikmasenu, and he avenges our vengeance presently. It's not the blessing after the Megillah is not thanking him for the past. It's praising God for his ongoing involvement and continuation to do that in that way. So that's why it's our, because we're just like any blessing. We're thanking when we thank God for something, and it's almost always in the present, because we're praising God for his continual help and assistance and providence and provision, and so it's saying in the present tense. So Rabbi Reisman said it's not really a question in the first place. It's just you have to understand the distinction. One is thanking God for what happened in the past, so it's in the past tense and it refers to them. And one is praising God for what he does continuously, so it's present tense and it's us. Okay, to close, this will, and I apologize if you have to go at 1, but this will be about 5-7 more minutes. We're going to close with probably the most oft-quoted explanation of the dreidel, of the message. Not that I expect that you should, that it's not famous necessarily, but if you look through articles, everybody quotes the Bnei Yissaschar, and uh, and the Bnei Yissaschar develops an idea that really starts in Parshas Vayigash, which is next week's parsha, and in Parshas Vayigash it says that that Yaakov sent Yehuda. So let's just get where we're at. Yosef has revealed himself to his brothers. He has sent for his father Yaakov to come down to Egypt, and Yaakov sends Yehuda um, ahead. It says Ve'es Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef leharos lefanav Goshna. And I apologize that I didn't give a source sheet that would have this. You could see it inside, but it says Yaakov sent Yehuda ahead to Yosef to kind of prepare in Goshna. What's Goshna? So Goshna is means to Goshen. Goshen was where the province in Egypt where Yaakov and his family would establish themselves, and Goshen, that's where the Jews lived, and so he sent him ahead to Goshna. Goshna, when you have a hey at the end, can mean to Goshen, and the Bnei Yissaschar asks, first of all, why did he do this? Why did he send Yehuda ahead? First of all, and secondly, why does it say Goshna instead of saying Li Goshen? It's two ways to say to Goshen, but here it chose to express it as Goshna rather than Le Goshen to Goshen. So the Bnei Yissaschar says that we know that Egypt, being the very first exile, was kind of the catch-all, was the source of all future exiles. What are the future exiles? Well, the future exiles, there are going to be four exiles, and the first was Galus Bavel, the exile of Babylonia, when they destroyed the first base of Mikdash and sent us into exile. The second was what we would call Paras Umadai, Persia, Media. That was after they took over from the Babylonians. That's where the story of Purim takes place. And the third was Yavan, Greece, and which was a Galus, an exiling our own land. And the last is what we're still in, what we call the Galus of Rome, of Edom, and that's the exile that continues till this day. So those are the four Galuses, four exiles, and Egypt was the source of all of that. And he makes a reference. It says by Egypt, it says Vayhi bayamim harabim ahem. It was in those great days, those many days. But he notes that the word rabim, Reish Beis Yud Mem, can stand for Romi, Bavel, Yavan, Madai. Rome, Babylonia, Greece, and Madai. And the exodus from Egypt is a root of all exoduses. For all future, that there will be an exodus, there will be a salvation from all future exiles. And each of these exiles, these four exiles, correspond to a different part of a person. So, or a different aspect of a person. One is the guf, the body. One is the nefesh, the soul. One is the seichel, the mind. And one is a catch-all of all of that, all together. And each of these corresponds to one of the exiles. So we had first the exile of Babylonia. The Babylonians destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, destroyed the temple. They were the first to put a stop to the karbanos, the offerings. The offerings are essential to our nefesh, to our soul. It says by offerings, it says nefesh ki sakriv, when a soul will bring an offering. So the nefesh is corresponds to the Babylonian exile. In the next one was Parasumadai, Persia and Media. That was where the Purim story took place. They tried to destroy our bodies. They went after our guf, our bodies, and so that corresponds to guf, to the body. that exile of Persia, Media. Then we had Yavan. Yavan, the Greeks. The Greeks went after our intellect. They didn't want to kill us. They just wanted to assimilate us. They wanted um, to basically instill their Greek ideology into our minds. They went after our seichel, our minds. And then there's the last one, which is the everything. In this long galus, in this long exile of Rome, you have all of that combined. So says the Bnei Yissaschar that that we know that in the future there will be a redemption, and the redemption will be from Mashiach. Mashiach will lead the redemption, the Redeemer. And Mashiach, actually, there's two parts to Mashiach. There's two stages. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, a Mashiach that's a descendant of Yosef. And then there's Mashiach ben David, the descendant of David from the tribe of Yehuda. And so Yaakov, before we go into Galus, before we go into the exile of Egypt, that's kind of encompasses all future exiles, but will eventually have a redemption, and the redemption from Egypt is the source for all future redemptions. So he sends Yehuda to meet up with Yosef, to kind of get us set up there, because it's Yehuda and Yosef whose progeny will be the Mashiach ben Yosef, the descendant of Yosef, and the Mashiach that will come from Yehuda, from the line of David. So Yaakov wanted to send them ahead to, again, he doesn't go into detail exactly what it means to get set up, but he sent them to Goshna. What's Goshna? Goshna stands for, the Gimel is Guf, the body, because there will be an exile where they go after our bodies. That's going to be Persia and Media. There's going to be the Seichel, the mind, that's the Shin or the Sin, Goshna, Gimel Shin, Gimel Sin. And they will go after the Seichel, the minds, that's going to be in Greece. There will be the Nefesh, the soul, that's the Nun. They're going to go after our soul, that's going to be with Babylonia. And then there's going to be the catch-all of Rome, which stands for Hakol, everything. Goshna has Guf, Seichel, Nefesh, and Hakol, everything, all encompassed in the Galus, in the exile of Rome. And Yaakov sends Yehuda and Yosef to Goshna, to Goshen, to prepare for those exiles, prepare for Egypt and all those future exiles which are to come. And what is going to be what ends all the exiles? Mashiach. And Goshna has the same gematria, has the same numerical value as Mashiach. And actually it's one off, but it's close. It's one off, but it's close. You're allowed to be one off in gematrias. There's a proof for that from a verse for another time. But so it's basically on. It's also the gematria of Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, Hashem Yimloch. That Hashem is king, Hashem was king, Hashem will be king. That's what will be recognized by all at the time of Mashiach. And so in preparation for this, Yaakov sends Yehuda to meet up with Yosef and kind of prepare us to be able to experience those exiles and to have the Mashiach come, which is, again, one off, but basically the gematria of Goshna. And he says, in conclusion, this will also explain Minag Avoseinu Torah, the custom of our forefathers, which is Torah, that the minag, the custom on Chanukah, is to play with a small piece of wood that's square, and it has 4 sides, and it has the letters of Goshna, Gimel, Shin, Nun, and Hey, or Nun, Gimel, Hey, Shin, but that's the same letters as Goshna, and one on each side, and they all rotate on one point. And he says that the idea is that the letters around the dreidel are references to those 4 kingdoms, those 4 exiles, and each exile, again, the guf, the exile of the body, and the seichel, and the nun, which is the nefesh, the soul and Hakol and everything. That's all hinted to on the dreidel, and they're all rotating around the point, and the point is the Jewish people. The point represents the Jewish people. So I heard it said the Yud, it's like a Yud, and it's the Yid, it's the Jew. But in any event, it's all rotating around the Jewish people. And I also heard the idea that it never gets us, right? It can never get to that point. It never can actually get to that point. They're going around and around. But that represents kind of history, and but eventually, eventually, all of those exiles just come down to that one point. All that remains at the end is the Jewish people, and this is also hinted to in the dreidel, the letters of the dreidel, Nun Gimel Hey Shin, the same letters as Goshna, representing the four exiles, and they're spinning around us. Everything that they do rotates around the Jewish people, trying to get to us, never able to get to us. Eventually, it will just be one point left. And also, again, those letters being the gematria of Mashiach, hinting to the idea that embedded in all these exiles is the future salvation through the Mashiach. Okay.
Well, very good, Rabbi.
Yeah, that was great, Rashad.
Fascinating.